Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all joining from India, US, and Japan. I am Group Captain Shekhar Mehta, and I welcome you all to the Indus International Research Foundation on our program on Indo-Japanese cooperation in Indo-Pacific. However, before we start the program, I would request Brigadier Sandeep Kumar, who is the President IIRF, to make his welcome address and give his introduction to today's topic. Brigadier Sandeep Kumar, please.
Good afternoon, our Japanese guest. Good evening, Admiral Shekhar Sinha sir, and good morning to everybody in India. Today is a subject which we will be dealing with is Indo-Japanese cooperation in Indo-Pacific. Actually, the world is at a turning point in history. The international community is facing its greatest trial since World War II. And we have entered a new era of crisis with increased threat of nuclear war and unethical and unrestricted use of disruptive technology. The main player being China. China's current external stance, military activities, and other activities have become a matter of serious concern and great strategic challenge for India, Japan, and the international community. 4 nuclear tests in the last 10 years, 2013, 2 in 2016 and 2017, promotion of unilateral changes to the status quo by force in Spratly Islands and Scarborough, Senkaku Islands, intensified activities by China around Taiwan, firing of 5 Chinese ballistic missiles which landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone in August 2022, intrusion into Japan's territorial waters by China's Coast Guard vessels, etc. in that area. In addition to that, intrusion into Indian territory resulting in standoff in Doklam, Yangtze, Galwan in the last 7 years. Increased face-to-face arguments between PLA and Indian Army all along the line of control, especially in the eastern portion, that is Fishtail, Bisa, and Yangtze. Increased presence of Chinese spy ships, submarines, and naval forces in Indian Ocean region, etc., are all matters of strategic concern for Japan, India, ASEAN countries, and littorals in Indian Ocean region. China has extensively and rapidly enhanced its military capabilities by major increase in defense budgeting and war equipment profile. Comparing the figures in 2013 with 2023, its defense budget has enhanced by 2.3 times, naval forces have gone up by 2 times, air assets by 2.5 times, and nuclear warheads by 1.6 times. Major reorganization of PLA, with the theater commands having combined arms brigades with support arms and services and UAV and drone units, have occurred in the last few years. Their space, cyber, and electronic warfare capabilities are unmatched in the Asian continent. China's economic growth in the last 10 years had been phenomenal. Only recently the growth has come down courtesy the pandemic years. Chinese geopolitical, economic, and military influence on neighbors of Japan and India and East African and West Asian countries is likely to turn hegemonic as time passes. This will be a matter of great strategic concern for Japan and India and other countries internationally. This calls for greater understanding of the situation and increased geopolitical influence and economic and defense cooperation between the 2 countries. So today we will see how it can be achieved with the help of our expert panel of speakers on the subject: Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Adi Vishish Seva Medal, Vaisuna Medal, VM and Bar, and Dr. Satoru Nagao, who is an expert on this subject. With this introduction, I hand you over to Raj for the conduct of the event. Thank you.
Very much, Brigadier Sandeep, sir. Now, since the President IIRF has already given a fairly detailed background of the context in which we are holding our discussions today, I will spare myself from introducing the topic again. The focus of our talk today, nevertheless, will remain Indo-Pacific, its security structure, and the role of Indo-Japanese ties in it. I am sure no observer of geopolitics will disagree with me that the South China Sea is gearing itself for some big event, or at least the stakeholders are trying hard to avert it. As a result, we see today emergence of multi-layered, multi-layered and mostly overlapping security circles of alliances and arrangements forming in the Indo-Pacific, giving it a very kaleidoscope-like architecture. If dormant pre-existing old groupings like Quad and ASEAN defense ministers meet and plus 8 nations, then ANZAC arrangement between the New Zealand and Australia, 5I comprising Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and US, etc., have been re-energized on the one hand. Then few new regional security alliances like AUKUS comprising Australia, UK, and US, and the Quad Plus, from which it seems India will be missing. The Indo-Pacific preoccupation in Europe. NATO too has turned its attention towards Indo-Pacific. Therefore, in today's talk, we will try to declutter this utterly confusing state of affairs in Indo-Pacific. At least it is confusing to the uninitiated. We will also try to explore the mystique of Indo-Japanese ties playing an important role in this process. What are India and Japan's major concerns and vital interests in South China Sea and Indo-Pacific? What is it in India that attracted the erstwhile Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to forge such a personal close relation with Prime Minister Modi? What is that brought these two remote nations together to become trusted partners in Indo-Pacific? What kind of role Japan is playing in South Asia and IIRF, and why? To discuss all this, we have today with us Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who is the former Chief of Integrated Defense Staff in the Ministry of Defense in India, and former Flag Officer Commanding in Chief Western Naval Command, and therefore considered an authority on anything related to India's maritime affairs in Indo-Pacific. And Dr. Satoru Nagao, who is an accomplished and acclaimed Japanese scholar and a fellow of Hudson Institute, USA, specializing in Indo-US-Japan relationship in Indo-Pacific. While Admiral Sinha is joining us today from Texas, USA, Dr. Nagao has joined us from Tokyo. So today we have covered the full spectrum of our end-to-end global time zone. Welcome, Admiral Sinha, sir, and Dr. Nagao, and all the audience to the IIRF platform. For the kind information of all, the duration of today's session will be 1.5 hours, which includes the question from the audience. The discourse is planned in a question-answer format. However, if any speaker wishes to use slides or PPT, he is welcome. The audience would basically want to understand from the speaker what are the national interests and national perspective of the two nations on the issues involving South China Sea and Indo-Pacific and the mutuality of the two nations. So my first question of the day goes to Admiral Sinha, sir. I will begin by asking Admiral Sinha, with his vast, in-depth practical experience in dealing with security matters of this region, what in his perception are the primary maritime concerns and strategic challenges and economic interests of India in the Indo-Pacific in general and South China Sea in particular? And how does Indo-Japanese ties help in addressing them? This question goes to Admiral Sinha, sir.
Right. Namaskar, Jai Hind, and thank you very much, IIRF, for getting me to speak. Just one correction: I am not in Texas. I am right now in Phoenix, in Arizona. So, but very close to the IIRF's branch in Texas. So, inshallah, we'll be talking from there as well. And really, I'm delighted and I'm very honored to be sharing this panel with Dr. Nagao. He is a very dear friend, and I have held him in very high esteem all my life. We meet, we are good friends. So good to see you, Dr. Nagao. And sorry, I had to ring you up and tell you to please join because we were all waiting for you. So let me just let me begin by first thank Group Captain Mehta for very generous introduction that he gave. I'm certainly not the authority on anything. Yes, I've been a practitioner and I keep my eyes open and ears open and attend seminars and discussions like this. And there are people who are willing to listen to me. So I consider this as my, I'm very deeply honored. And so am I today, honored and humbled both. Um, First of all, let me just make 2, 3 very small points. One is a civilizational cooperation between India and Japan is quite old. In fact, you may be, possibly some of you may be knowing that Goddess Saraswati and Lord Ganesha is worshipped in Japan as well. So that is one thing to take it back to, our civilizational connect, Hinduism. Second point is that, as you know, during our freedom struggle, the Indian National Army, the Japan was the main country which held them in very high esteem, and they supported the INA for fighting the British forces in the northeastern region. And there is a war memorial, the historical Japanese war memorial in. It is in right now in Manipur. It's not sort of famous right now for any good things at the moment, but it is there. And there are figures of Ras Bihari Bose and Subhash Chandra Bose. They all have lived in Japan at some point in time, and large number of our INA forces. That brings me to the question which Group Captain Mehta has put across to me. Let me first talk about the economic interests. India is it's a country which is on a path of economic progress. We are right now fifth largest economy in the world, and I think that time will come, and Japan is very much ahead of us. Japan is at the third largest economy at the moment. I hope I am right, Dr. Nagao. So third largest economy in the world, and Japan is helping us to move ahead on our path of economic progress. There is fair amount of things are happening. As you know, both Japan and India are net importers of hydrocarbon, in their own countries, and most of it from the Gulf and South America, and possibly from the African continent, and they all traverse this, through the from the Indian Ocean. Our interaction with Japan is very old. Can I put it back to, let's say, 1993, when we started the Malabar bilateral exercise? It happened mainly because of the response to tsunami that we did. And that was a time when there was a lot of devastation in most of the Southeast Asian countries and some parts of India, particularly Andaman Nicobar. And therefore, the US Navy thought it right to tie up with the Indian Navy and do some sort of joint disaster sort of management and human assistance. And that is how Malabar actually started. And therefore, it was natural for India and US to take other like-minded countries on board for this bigger cause. And it was in 2005 or 2006, possibly, that there was an exercise. 2007. I'm sorry, 2007. I was fleet commander at that time. We had an exercise where we had 5 countries participating in Malabar. And Japan and Australia were the 2 new ones. And thereafter, Japan became almost a permanent feature of this Malabar. But officially, they joined in 2015. But we had exercise. Otherwise, we have had a lot of bilateral exercises, mainly to protect the sea lanes of communication, which are going through the Indian Ocean. And both countries had economic interest. Economic interest means trade, and mainly the energy security for both countries was. And there was a very tacit understanding between India and Japan that Indian Navy will uh, provide some kind of security to the oil which was being transported from various places through the Indian Ocean to the Malacca Strait into the South China Sea. That was an unwritten understanding. And we used to, anytime we got a request from the Japanese Navy that, this is an important cargo, we would normally, go together and do that. Uh, Now that is just one part of, our relationship. Going back to history, I can quote many more examples, but I think that's not the point. Uh, and you see, the Japanese and Indians have had such old association. I talked about Saraswati, and I talked about Lord Ganesha, and thereafter Buddhism. For a long, long time, there is a very large following of Buddhism in Japan, and India being the sort of, shall I say, the source of Buddhism. That's another thing which ties up Japan with India to a very, very large extent. Uh, Coming back to the security part, uh, a lot of people say that Malabar exercise and Quad, etc., are basically meant to, take on China, which may be right. There is no denying that fact. I would say that China has accelerated this cooperation, has accelerated this partnership amongst these four countries, and particularly Japan and India. Because if you look at it, in the oceanic zone, India and Japan are the closest to the Chinese. Japan is sitting right next door, and Captain Mehta mentioned about Senkaku Island, and on this side, India. India has a big land border problem, and we know that what happened in Galwan in 2020. So these are only an after effect of the basic differences that exist. The expansionism of China and resistance of Japan and India to prevent China from expanding are one very strong reason which has worked as a catalyst to the growing sort of cooperation. And therefore, um, when late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he was a world leader. Actually, he looked at this whole world in the totality of the whole world, and he said, and he spoke to the Indian Parliament, and he said that it is the confluence of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific which requires that there is a security in the maritime domain for all the seafarers. Mind you, it is not meant only for military use. And therefore, it actually started, the thought of Quad started in a manner where these four countries, particularly India, Japan, already had a very strong bilateral relation. As you know, they are doing a absolutely, shall I say, outstanding work in the Northeast as far as infrastructure development is concerned, and in many more places, which some of it I may not be able to spell out here. But there lot is happening, not only in the Northeast, but we are working together in Africa. We are working together in Sri Lanka. We are working together in many more countries that you can think of in Southeast Asia, and in the adjoining Indian Ocean littorals. So what happened was that when the Quad was actually thought of, it was made to provide some kind of HADR assistance, some kind of economic cooperation, or provide an alternate to the economic coercion or opaque economic activity of China in these areas. Large number of countries are facing the debt trap, and the Chinese loans are never very clear. They are all quite opaque. The terms and conditions are not known. As a result, a country goes really broke in paying them off. So the intention of these four countries was that let us provide an alternate financial support system, and we will do that. Uh, but when China became more and more aggressive in the South China Sea, which I'm sure Dr. Nagao will speak more on it, he is much closer home. Then it was realized that it is not only the military cooperation, but there is an economic coercion going on by China, and therefore we must have an alternate economic model, economic developmental model for all the littorals in the Indo-Pacific sort of zone. And that is how you have got the economic cooperation agenda. There are 7 different streams of this quad. By the way, maritime security is not part of it. There's no military component to this. But a lot of people say that, but Malabar, same 4 countries are there. Be it, when time comes, it will be, we'll see what happens. But right now, it is meant for providing an alternate source of infrastructure development, monetary help, HADR, and so many other things, like development, SEZ, industries, and those kind of things which are totally non-military. So I think that it is that necessity which has been accelerated by aggressive and economic coercion of China in these areas. And therefore, whatever is happening as far as India and Japan are concerned, because our bilateral relations go back to centuries of civilization back, and therefore we didn't have much difficulty in getting to understand each other. But having said that, I would still say that there is a great need. I was attending the India Foundation bilateral talks with Japan till I think last week only. There was the last one, and I think Dr. Naga also had a interview and some talk in that forum. Uh, my own view is that Japan can become more aggressive on every front. Right now, Japan's capability is not fully put to use by the partner countries. Uh, I guess there are reasons, and I'm sure that he will talk about it. But if Japan becomes little more aggressive, which we have seen in last about 6-7 years, if that happens and continue, then I think the sky, even not even sky, is the limit. So I think that the Indo-Japanese relationship is very historical. It is civilizational, and during our freedom struggle, thereafter, post-freedom struggle, and in the recent time, after the arrival of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who we consider as a very, very, very revered name here in India. In fact, when the bullet train was being built by the Japanese company with a very small sort of interest rate of 0.5% interest rate, the loan has been given. I have suggested to government that the first train should be named as Shinzo Abe Express. So let us see if that comes through. I'll put a stop here. Thereafter, I think Group Captain Mehta can keep needling and keep sort of making it wider. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral Sinha sir. You have given a very, very brief, very detailed, rather, answer to our question. And therefore, my next question will go to Dr. Nagao. Dr. Nagao, tell us, what are the major national security concerns and economic interests of Japan in Indo-Pacific in general and South China Sea in particular? And therefore, we would like to know what attracts Japan towards India in solving those issues. We have seen the Indian perspective from the Admiral Sinha side, so we would like to know a little Japanese perspective from your side. How do you view the security concerns, economic interests, and how India features in your scheme of things from the Japan side? Dr. Nagao.
Thank you very much, sir. It is a great honor for me to make presentation in this place, and it is a great honor for me to make presentation with Admiral Sinha. I learned a lot from him, so I'm very happy to be here. So, and firstly, is maybe to explain this, I try to use the PowerPoint, so I try to share the data. Okay.
Can you upload it from your end, Dr. Nagao? You can do it. If not, then you'll have to mail it to us.
I do not. Okay. I found a way.
If you can upload from your end, that would be. Yeah, it is uploaded.
Okay.
Lovely.
Okay. I'm sharing. Okay, that's not. This slide is just 最初から this one. Okay, I will explain one by one. Firstly, I need to explain the current India-Japan cooperation is defense-oriented. Why I can say so? Because indeed, when we check the trade between two countries, Japan is India's 1.9% of the total trade in 2022. And for Japan, India is Japan's 1.3% of the total trade in 2022. So trade hasn't progressed so much indeed. When we check the number of the Japanese people exchanges, number of the Indian stay in Japan, or number of Japanese stay in India, in this similar situation we can find. For example, in case of Japanese, in the October 2022, the Japanese government count the nearly 10,000 Japanese live in India. 10,000 is 5 times bigger than the 2005, so increased drastically. But compared with other country, in the United States, 400,000 Japanese living. In China, 100,000 Japanese living. And Australia, the nearly 100,000 Japanese living in Australia. So compared with this number, 10,000 in 1.4 billion the population country is very thin. So people exchange is also nearly nothing. So trade nothing. The people exchange is nothing. Despite this, in defense area, completely different situation. All of the three service, Army, Navy, Air Force, has already conducted many exercises. And this year is a remarkable year. Indian Army come to Japan, the 8th Battalion, and conducted joint exercises in Japan. Or fighter jet, Su-30 fighter jet come to Japan and conducted joint exercises. So, in the Navy, the number of ships conducted many many joint exercises in many places, not only Indian Ocean, but also the other area. So all of these exercises has happened, have already, and to share the information, two countries agreed the GSOMIA-like agreement, so they can share the military sensitive information. And AXA has already agreed. AXA is two countries can access base each other and share the supply each other. So when we check the current alliance system, the formal treaty-based alliance is very rare. Yes, recently Finland and Sweden joined the NATO. That is maybe for a long time, such kind of the treaty-based formal alliance hasn't happened in the world. But this is exceptional new cases. So when we check this agreement, we can see instead of the treaty-based alliance, one by one, the defense relation between India and Japan has progressed very much. So compare with the economy, compare with the people exchanges, defense side, relation has progressed very fast pace. That's why I confidence to say this is defense-oriented relation. And so that's but view from the purpose of this relation, it is natural. Because reason, if we point it out, firstly, the purpose of this relation is China, and secondly, China, and thirdly, China. So that's why China's action make us a friend. And so that's why defense-related is understandable. So China-related, why China-related is so important, I need to explain by slide a little. Now I need to show Chinese naval and air route around Japan. You can see it's a red line in this figure. Yes, Chinese ship and combined with Russian ship in some case, surrounding Japan again and again. And some Chinese nuclear submarines violate Japan's territorial sea, and strategic bomber also violating Japan territory. So that's why China is very serious issue for Japan. But this is not this is not only the area China provoke other country, because we can check the number of China's vessel identified with the contiguous zone water surrounding the Senkaku Island of Japan. Yes, that is a number from 12 to 1,000. But when we check the number of China's incursion in the land border between India and China, yes, in number is also increased in the same period, from 200 to 663. So we can compare the two figures, overlap. The China's action, China is provoking India and Japan at the same time.
Can you shift the slide, Dr. Nagao?
Slide, yes, I slide, but
Okay.
did you see?
It's only the opening slide, India, Japan, why?
Oh, no. Okay, I am okay. I tried.
Yeah. Now it is coming. Figure 3 is there. Yeah.
Figure 3 is there. Okay,
Yeah.
move is a little slow. Okay, I will explain. This is the figure, the China's activity around Japan. And this is the number of the Chinese vessel identified around Senkaku Island. And this is the number of the China's incursion around the India-China border, land border. So I overlap two in one as a one figure. It's this figure 3. So we can see China provoke India and Japan at the same time. In 2012, it has increased, and 2019 increased again. And from the 2011 to 2019, China is escalating their activity, not only against Japan, but also against India. So India and Japan share same problem, which is China. And in case of India, of course, India shares a land border with China, but Indian Ocean is also the interest area of India, and China is violating this interest. This is the figure I drew in the map. All of these are the activity of China in the Indian Ocean region. So not only the land border side, but also the sea side, China is provoking India. That's why the defense or security is the main concern for both India and Japan. That's why this defense area relation has progressed very fast pace compared with the economy, compared with people exchanges. But if the India and Japan cooperate, what can we do? It's a matter. And indeed, we can do much. Because when we check the pattern of the China's territory expansion, the location of the India and Japan is advantage. When we check the China's territory expansion, this figure is published by the Japan's Ministry of Defense, and checked what happened in South China Sea. Indeed, the South China Sea is a very important example to identify the pattern of China's activities. China used this pattern in other areas against Japan, against India, against other countries too. But the South China Sea is typical example already happened. China's pattern is when France withdraw from the Indo-Pacific Peninsula, including Vietnam, Cambodia, or other areas, China occupies half of the Paracel Island. That has happened in 1950s. 1970s, after the Vietnam War, US withdrew from Vietnam. China occupied another half of the Paracel Island. in 1980s, when Soviet troops reduced the number in Vietnam, China occupied the sixth feature of the Spratly Island. And in 1990s, when US withdrew from Philippines, China took the Scarborough Shoal. No, Scarborough Shoal, sorry, Mischief Reef. So what, there is a pattern of China's territorial expansion. When the military balance has changed and they find a power vacuum, they steal it. China is thief. That is a pattern of China's territorial expansion. If so, to deter China's territorial expansion, what should we do? Maintaining military balance is the solution. But maintaining military balance is very difficult because China is rich. 2011 to 2020, so 1 decade, China increased their military expenditure 76%. 76%. During the US decreased their military expenditure 10%. Decreased 10%. So 76 increase, 10% decrease. That is the situation. So still US spent more than 2.7 times military expenditure. So that's why the US is not weak. But compared with the past, China is catching up. And to maintain military balance, we need more budget. So that's why new method is needed. New method is strategic cooperation. If India and Japan cooperate, China need to divide their defense budget, military expenditure, two sides, against Japan, against India. So in this case, view from Japan, view from India, it's easier to maintain military balance. Not easy, but easier. So that's why this cooperation is effective way as a defense strategy to deter China's provocation. So Quad, US, Australia, or Quad Plus, Southeast Asia. Why we talk about this? Or including the current European allies, some countries come to Indo-Pacific. Why this cooperation is a matter of concern? Because we can divide China's military expenditure, multiple fronts, multiple sides. So that's why this is one kind of sharing burden and effective way to military balance to deter China's territorial expansion. So now, to materialize this kind of the concept, what should we do is the matter. Of course, the defense area, we should cooperate in some fixed one. I pointed, as a defense cooperation, I pointed 3 as a suggestion. Firstly, India and Japan should cooperate in the strike capability. Because if India try to defend as a defensive defense strategy, in this case, China do not worry about India, and China concentrate their forces against the Pacific side or Japan side if they want to do it. For example, invading Taiwan, they can concentrate all forces because the defensive defense means that China can ignore India's strike capability. But and vice versa, if China decide to invade India, in this case, if Japan do not have the strike capability, in this case, China ignores the Japan side and all of the forces concentrate to the land border with India and invade India. There is no deterrence. That's why India and Japan should possess enough level of the strike capability to divide China's military expenditure. Such cooperation is very important. So when the strike capability deploy or move, we should coordinate, even if it's peacetime. That is the first suggestion. Second one is, of course, India needs making India weapon development project. Japan should cooperate or support or cooperate with this India's indigenous weapon development project. Why? Because currently, any country cannot make their weapon completely. For example, some parts of the US-made weapon, US need to import some parts from Japan, some parts from other country, because when we check the supply chain is integrated globally. So without a cooperate with other country, any country cannot make weapons. So under such kind of situations, of course, China controls the part of the weapon development of the other country to providing some material, rares, or some parts. So that's not good. But in this case, if India want to develop their weapons themselves, Japan can provide some certain parts. And such kind of cooperation with a friendly country, like-minded country, whereas that is the best way to secure the supply line of our weapon development. So, and politically, India say this is indigenous weapon, and India really develop the weapon development technology or production lines. So, but through this process, Japan should support or provide parts for the making India weapons. And one of the example is currently Japan tries to sell the Unicorn, the military antenna for the naval ship, to share the sensitive information, sensitive data between naval ship and naval ship. This Unicorn is a good example. If this Unicorn India decide to import and integrate the naval ship of Indian indigenous warship, in this case, India can say this is make in India, but at the same time, Japan can cooperate with this project, and supply line is very secure because India and Japan are partner. That is the ideal situation. We should do that. That is the second suggestion. Third suggestion is infrastructure project. Currently, of course, Admiral Sinha already mentioned, in the Northeast India, Japan invests India's infrastructure project. On surface, this is civil purpose project connected India and Southeast Asia. But of course, trade connection between India and Southeast Asia reduced China's influence in the Southeast Asia. That's true. But at the same time, indeed, there is a hidden defense aspect of this project. Hidden defense aspect is if the infrastructure developed well in the Indian Northeast, Indian Army can use this infrastructure to deploy forces in the border area and use this as a supply line. Food and ammunition or other parts, repair parts can carry through this infrastructure to strengthen defense capability of the land border. So that's why infrastructure projects is dual use. So strategically we use it. For example, if India need to develop the defense supply line in the Ladakh region, Japan can provide the heavy machine to dig the mountain and making the road. That is, it looks like this is civil purpose, but the military aspect is also included. So these three corporations could strengthen the relation between India and Japan in the defense area. Of course, economic area, Admiral Shekhar already mentioned, make business out of China is best, of course, because China is rich. China can invest hugely for their military modernization program. So that's why their military modernization is so fast-paced. So China's income itself is a cause of problem. That's true. And we should not rely on the supply line to China. This kind of well, we should not rely on the Chinese market because we rely on China. China can use this situation as a power to impose economic sanction against the other country. So that's why these are also important. But So far, India-Japan relation focusing on the defense area. So defense area and the non-military area, such as economic security or other area, both we should promote. So finally, I need to say the age of India will come. The Admiral Shekhar mentioned Japan is the world number 3 size GDP economy, but in the near future, India will be number 3, and India is catching up to China. So age of India will really come if India win competition with China. Because China will not allow India to be the rival. It is natural. And that's why China try to prevent India to rise the same level with China. So that's why India must compete with China. That is the destiny. But in this case, we need to remember the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's word. In 2007, he addressed in the Indian Parliament and addressed the conference of 2C. That time, he clearly said that what a strong India is the best interest of Japan, and a strong Japan is the best interest of India. So now is the time to materialize this word. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Nagao. It was a lovely presentation, and you gave a thorough Japanese perspective, and you very much justified why Japan should look up to India and why India should look up to Japan. There are so much of convergence of strategic, security, economic interest, and you have beautifully showed it on the graph how we both are being threatened by a particular nation in the same measure, and that's naturally will like to bring us together. Three things you have pointed out to counter China. We need to have a better military response, a better economic response, and we have a better infrastructure that can deter China from thinking of any misadventure. In this context, only my question goes to Admiral Sinha. Sir, Admiral Sinha, sir, the armed conflict is the last resort for any strategist. You will agree. Primary objective of every strategist, therefore, is to avert war and achieve its objective without fighting it, which is applicable to this case also. One way to do is to convince the adversary that we have the capability to make the cost of conflict so high for him that it will be no longer profitable option. Something to this this extent was just now mentioned by Mr. Nagao when he talked that we should have a strong military. And so in this context, I will ask you, because you are the right man, does Indian Navy with its current stature but huge geographical advantage and myriad of cooperative arrangements, partnership and understandings with multiple advanced friendly navies, does Indian Navy today is in a position to act as a deterrent to China against any misadventure in Indo-China border, IOR or South China Sea? Are we in that position? Admiral Sinha, sir.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really very pointed question, and everybody probably will ask this question. Now, let me give you example of the Galwan period. While Galwan was going on, probably come to halt, but they had not gone back to the original positions. You would have seen that the activities around the Malacca Strait of the Indian Navy increased quite a lot, mainly to in maritime field.
Sorry for the interruption, sir. I will request to respond to the questions. The next the question in short, because we will have to take some question from the audience also, and we
Okay,
have
okay.
already.
Okay.
So I will have one more question with Dr. Nagao,
Yeah.
which I will expect a short answer, and then we will move on to the audience questions.
Yeah,
So
short answer is yes. It is possible to deter because the most of the trade and particularly the energy security of China is quite dependent on the sea lines of communication passing through Indian Ocean. And any presence of Indian Navy's warships off the Malacca Strait or even en route can actually, what happens in case of the energy security, there is a train of the tankers which go and offload at a particular refinery in China, and it keeps giving the number of gallons or number of barrels produced every day, and that can happen only if so many number of tankers, if they reach in time. If they don't reach in time, if you can prevent them from reaching in time, you would have achieved the first intention, that it is going to impact their economy, the growth of their economy, progress and fighting ability to start with. And therefore I was in China some time back in last week of May at Sichuan University, and they were quite worried that India's geographical advantage. When I said that Malacca Strait is our big problem because you can mine that place, he said no, but you are in a bigger advantage. And this guy was from I knew that he's from the party, a card holder. So I think it worries them a lot. And that is why they are making so many alternate arrangements for taking the oil from picking up from Gulf and going following the land route and going right up to China, or making a port in Sitwe, pipeline going up to Kunming. All these are an attempt, but they cannot match the requirement of China's energy requirement by doing all this. Our own assessment is that till about 2050, about 53% of China's oil will still traverse on Indian Ocean. And that is where Indian Navy is a big deterrence. As you know that we have a mission-based deployment now. There are 7 areas have been identified, and they are monitored. Presence of Indian either ship or aircraft or submarine, or our friends with whom we have 2+2 arrangement, Japan being one of them. So we have arrangement by which the domain awareness can be updated online at all times. And we are in a position to delay the supply line of the oil going into the Chinese refinery. So answer is yes, if you apply some pressure, China will have to rethink its strategy somewhere else, and that will be on the land border.
Thank you, sir. That is very reassuring, and I think all the effort that is going on in the Indian Indo-Pacific and South China Sea, with all the myriad of alliances and on, finally it all boils down to, or sum up to, creating some sort of deterrence which is credible and very convincing, and which will make, as Admiral Sinha just now said, that it will make China think twice before contemplating any kinetic engagement, misadventure, etc. So we are working towards the deterrence. Therefore, my next question to Dr. Nagao will be that that the military deterrence has been well covered by Admiral Sinha. Can you tell us what kind of infrastructure and economic deterrence that you contemplate, and what is attracting Japan to South Asia? So I will be a little specific to South Asia. Tell us, what are the different manner Japan is engaging itself in South Asia? Apart from economic, commercial, and development angles, what are the strategic perspective that prompts Japan to engage in South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, and why? To you, Dr. Nagao.
Of course, Japan has well developed in this region. That is beneficial for Japan. Japan is thinking for a long time. That's why even if China, in the past, Japan supported China's project. But now we regret this. Why we supported China in the past? Because after China developed, China is intimidating Japan by their military. So our focusing on Southeast Asia has happened along with Japan's support to the other Asian countries, including China. China, Taiwan, South Korea, these are the good candidates developed in this region. And that time, Japan supports this infrastructure of these countries. After that, Japan started focusing on Southeast Asia. And now we're focusing on the full Indo-Pacific, including Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, these countries. So one by one, Japan stepping up the infrastructure projects and support these local community, local countries. But currently, Japan is facing the new rival, which is China, which supported by Japan in the past. So China suggests more bigger the infrastructure project in Southeast Asia and South Asia. And that is the default trap. In case of Japan, because the main purpose is supporting the local countries by providing infrastructure or providing the material or skill itself, there is no problem related with the debut. We can extend the deadline in many cases, even if the extending deadline is not good habit. But in case of China, China's infrastructure has a different purpose. Their security is the main concern, we think, because supporting the local skill or development is not the main. That's why when the deadline comes, they try to take and they try to ask to return money they invested. That's why debut trap has happened. And the interest rate is very high compared to Japan's one. Japan's one is 0.2 to 3% of the interest rate. World Bank or Asia Development Bank, which lead by Japan, that was this interest. But China's case, 6 to 8%, more than double. So interest rate. So when deadline comes, this country create a huge debt. They cannot return. In case of Sri Lanka, when they lost the control of the Hambantota port, their debt is the size. They need to spend 400 years to return. So, and indeed, this is not the only example. Djibouti, the same situation. Djibouti gives China the huge naval base, huge area for their naval base. Why? Because when we check the debt to China is very big. So now the Japan's infrastructure project is has a new purpose, strategic purpose. Not only the supporting local country, but also destroy China's suggestion. In case of Bangladesh, when China suggests the Sonadia port project, Japan suggests the Matabari port project just side of Sonadia port project. So Bangladesh can check the content of the two infrastructure projects. Finally, they choose Japan's one because Japan's one is workable. China's one is just advertisement. Money size is big, but no fixed plan to achieve the goal. So that's why they choose Japan. In this case, Japan's suggestion destroyed China's project. And Japan start to do to prevent China's debut trap in this region. So that is another strategic purpose now. And in Southeast Asia, despite China suggest a huge number of the huge size of the infrastructure project to Southeast Asia, when we check this infrastructure project, Southeast Asian country accept. Indeed, Japan's one is more bigger than the China's because this Southeast Asian country already known that Japan's one is workable and China's one is just a lip service. So that's why still Japan is influential, and that is current Japan Southeast Asia infrastructure strategy, I think. Thank you.
Very much, Dr. Nagao. That to a very large extent answers the question. That yes, Japanese participation in infrastructure building in South Asia, it is of course participating in other parts of the world also, right up to Africa and Southeast Asia, of course. But I was very specific about South Asia, and Japanese infrastructure participation in South Asia is very, very visible and prominent. And as you have just now mentioned, that it has actually achieved its objective, that is to deter and to foil a Chinese attempt to get a strategic footing in South Asia, which is a matter of concern to India, and that is China is doing through the medium of infrastructure, BRI, and it needs to be countered, and it can be only countered with better infrastructure proposals made by the Japan, India, and our other allies in the West, USA, and all. And that's why a lot of funds and money is being made available for infrastructure development in South Asia. Sir, now the next question goes to Admiral Sinha, and that question is coming from our President, Brigadier C. Sandeep Kumar, and he wants to know, where does Vietnam, Philippines, and say other Southeast Asian countries stand in all this, and how can Japan influence them? For you.
Yeah, let me just add a couple of things to what Dr. Nagao said. Just a few days back, there is an economic integration or intertwining agreement has been signed with the Sri Lankan government, and the Trincomalee port development. I can see that possibly Japan and India will do it together. That was the proposal long back in the beginning, but in between the PRC sort of poked its nose, and Sri Lanka did not have any choice but to agree to them. But it may not happen now. Already India has given them nearly $4 billion to get over some of the loans and complete those infrastructure projects. So I think that you will find more and more indulgence of Japan. Second one is that there is a India, Japan, Africa growth corridor. Though not much has happened, that is because Africa is in bloody turmoil by itself. Every day some coup takes place and the government goes off. And the big thing to all my sort of colleagues who have joined, the big thing between India and Japan these are two democracies. They have very similar worldview. They want peace and stability. They don't want to fight a war. Japan is the last country to invite a war. You see what devastation that took place in the Second World War. So I think the intention is, like you said, it should deter. But Japan certainly is very keen that it should be powerful enough to deter the Chinese aggression. And so is India. And armed forces, particularly the naval power, they're called force in being. You be so strong that the other guy thinks twice before he comes and fingers you anywhere else, because the naval forces don't have any borders. There's no border to guard, and it's an open sea for the whole world. So what India and Japan are doing, they're actually doing for rest of the world for safe usage of the seas, free and open sea as they keep calling. And there should be no obstruction. Nobody should be asking you, where are you going and why are you going? Who are you? But this is exactly what China is doing to almost everybody in the South China Sea. So I think that I would say that the context is much bigger. If you look at the whole world, there are very few countries who are only looking for peace, friendship, and Japan and India come very well above everybody else. And that is the reason for our cooperation. Democracy, civilization. Basically, these are the people who think that the whole world is one family. They would totally agree to that. And that is why the friendship between the two countries, the two leaders, it is showing so much of effect. I mean, how quickly, even the Prime Minister Kishida paid a visit to India so many times. And most of them were, not scheduled. He just came. He gave a call to Prime Minister Modi, said, I'm coming. He said, it has happened. So I think it is the question of meeting of minds because of very similar way that two countries look at the world, peacefully. Okay, coming back to your question about Southeast Asia, all the countries that you have named, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, they're all part of the ASEAN bloc. There is one big problem about ASEAN. When it comes to economic cooperation, they know that China is next door neighbor, and only China can make them progress to wherever they want to. Therefore, the intertwining of economy of Southeast Asian countries is more with China, and it will continue to remain so. Why? Because they feel very worried if they start moving away, the Chinese might punish them otherwise, right? Because these are small economies, small countries. Whereas when it comes to security, they will always fall back on the US or US-led partnership organizations like Quad or Malabar. In fact, there is fair amount of activity in the ASEAN. Some of them to come as observer members of Malabar, some of them to become observer members of Quad. There was a big rumor or rather talk that South Korea was about to be made observer member during the last summit meeting which took place in Tokyo. And well, it didn't happen, but there is no smoke without a fire. You see, so there is something to it. I've been meeting South Korean friends, and they said that there's because there has been a change of government, they didn't want to jump into it immediately of a new president, but he's more hawkish. So coming to Southeast Asia, you see that in spite of so much of overbearing of China, Philippines has bought missile from you. There is a ship which has been delivered to Vietnam, and we have been giving them many things for a long time. Their submariners are being trained here for many years. They're training bilateral exercises, the trade, everything. But they cannot ignore the fact that China is also their land border. Is a land neighbor, and it's not a very big country. So that apprehension will always remain. You look at Indonesia, they want to. In fact, if time comes, probably they will be buying your Akash missile. The talk is already on the final stages. It's just that they don't want to annoy China. So it is more of the apprehension of what China will do. And for that apprehension to go, these four countries, Japan, Australia, US, and India, they will have to provide an alternate security assurance to these countries, to my mind. It will not happen on its own. If you give security assurance, you will find that gradually they will start removing their umbilical cord as far as economy is concerned from China. You see the supply chain which Dr. Nagao talked about, very important point. The supply chain is already moving away from China, and Vietnam has been the biggest beneficiary. Vietnam, Japan wants to move out a lot of his. Japan has very large investment in China. They want to move out. Taiwan, almost 20% between these two countries. So this is a little catch-22 because we have made China, larger than really 10 foot. So China is not 10 foot tall, but we believe that they're 10 foot tall. So I think that there is some bold actions are required for that. The preparations are going on, and most of the Southeast Asian countries will fall for security, and ultimately for the moment supply chain starts moving. I have a feeling that Southeast Asia has nothing to worry about because supply chain itself will take care of their economy. There's such a huge market in the world. Indonesia has been a beneficiary. Philippines is now virtually, totally an American camp. They don't have to worry. So I think the 2-3 countries who are, you can forget about Laos and Cambodia because they are as good as extension of China. You can do nothing. They're already a single party rule. And Cambodia, the change of prime minister is not just by the way, because the son is more pliable. He's much closer to China than the father is. So these are so many personal factors, geopolitical factors, but I can see that time is coming when the disconnection of Southeast Asian countries as far as economy is concerned has begun, and it will continue to move as long as Japan, India, US, Australia provide a very robust security guarantee to these countries. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Very enlightening, and it is very heartening to learn from this discourse that all the effort that is being put by the whole liberal and open world today is turning the tide. There are so many examples that came up in this discourse, which is symptomatic and shows the sign that tide is turning, and things are not going to be the same in future with the kind of Herculean and the global effort that is being put in every department, whether it is a supply chain, whether it is a strategic deterrence, it is a military posture, or it is an infrastructure. A lot is happening, and it is showing results. Dr. Nagao has just cited examples in South Asia, how his Japanese intervention has neutralized the Chinese attempt. So my next question is from Rishi Atre. He has asked Dr. Nagao to comment on the role of Russia in the maritime domain. Japan has a dispute with Russia, while India has long-term good ties with the. This is a very tricky question. Will you like to take, Dr. Nagao? The Russia is the invisible force in this theater.
Yes. Yeah, that is a big problem indeed. Because when we check the map, we can see the sea between Japan and Russia. So it looks like there is no land border issue, but that's not true. For a long time, the two countries' naval vessels confront each other, especially submarine. Russia has many submarines, and Japan's anti-submarine forces is very big. So under the sea, there is looks like the border. And indeed, for Russia's nuclear strategy, Sea of Okhotsk is the best place to hide their nuclear ballistic missile submarine. But there is no good port around the Sea of Okhotsk. That's why from Vladivostok, these submarines go to the Sea of Okhotsk and hide it. But to go the Sea of Okhotsk from Vladivostok, they need to cross the 3 straits between Japan's island. That's why always Japan's anti-submarine forces pursued activity of the Russian submarine to go the Sea of Okhotsk. That is Japan's role. That's why Japan's anti-submarine forces is very big, nearly half of the U.S. Navy. 100, nearly now 80, but nearly 100 anti-submarine patrol planes, despite India possesses only 14. So Japan anti-submarine is the most priority area, and the main target was Russia. So under such kind of situation, Russia, when talk about India-Japan cooperation, India asked Japan to export Japan's submarine. That cases we face a problem. Submarine for Japan, submarine is the main force to confront with Russia. And so we have the will to export submarine to India, but at the same time, if the Russian naval officer or weapon expert is try to check the Russian-made weapon in India and coincidentally find the Japanese submarine in the Indian naval port, there is a possibility the military secret of our submarine revealed to Russia. That is serious. So that's why indeed the relation between India and Russia is preventing Japan to share the sensitive military technology to India. That is the current situation. So India-Russia relation, yes, for India, Russia is trustworthy friend, because for a long time, Russia consistently support India. Russia did not change the attitude toward India. So that's understandable. View from Japan, that is understandable why India trusts Russia, because there is no border issue, there is no historical problem, and good friends. But view from Japan, Russia is the main threat. And indeed, some emotional issues also exist, because after the World War II, why Japan accepts the US occupation? Because of Russia. Russia occupied area, Soviet soldiers commit many atrocities. For example, when the Russian soldiers come and to the shop, they take the food and start to eat. If the shop owner asks the Russian to pay the money, they put the gun and kill this owner. And because of the afraid, no one complained. So, but
Okay.
American rich soldiers, they deliver the food in many places. Hey, children, this chocolate, something like that. So, U.S. occupation is far better than the Soviet occupation. That's why when we talk about Russia, Russia is very bad guys, simply said. So that's why we cannot, we always worry about revealing our military-related technology to Russia. So that is a little big issue. But for in the long run, Russia's India will buy more weapons from other country, and Russia's officer will not walk around the Indian naval base. And this problem will not a big problem. Russia will be one of the customer in the future. So that's why in the long run,
Okay.
this will not become big problem, I think.
Okay. Okay. It
Well,
remains a tricky issue.
let me just interject one line to
Sure.
Dr. Nagao. All the Russian submarines which are with India, they are on the verge of being decommissioned. There may be very few, and they are all repaired by naval dockyards. For last 15-20 years, there is no Russian technician visiting any dockyard. I can tell you that with full conviction. So they don't have to worry. In fact, I know this point was brought out when the submarine discussion was going on for 75 India. And we know that this is the reason why the Japanese company pulled out from the, from the RFI stage. But I think that, that part, any country should be very confident that just because we are buying our relation with Russia is, to be very honest, it is a buyer and seller. So quite transactional. It is not, there's nothing in common. With Japan, we have in common, we are Asians. We are very culturally, we are close. We have, we have had same religion for a long time. So I think that I can understand the apprehension, but me having been the, at helm of affairs, I can assure you that it has not happened. It will not happen. It will never happen.
Thank you very much.
So we are now coming to the end of our time. We have in our audience General Dushyant Singh from Strive. He is our strategic partner. And General Dushyant Singh, are you there? And will you like to say something?
He has left.
General Dushyant has left. General Anil Kapoor, sir?
Sir, he's left.
He has also left. So we can still take one odd question. One is an important question that has come, though I have got half a dozen questions. Some are very long, some are short, but I can take only one question because of the shortage of time. I'm sorry to the contributors that all the questions cannot be taken in this session. And the one is question again comes from the President IIRF. He says, how can Japan help India in tackling its rare earth issue, because it is one of a very, very critical item, and is what kind of collaboration and expertise the Japanese has to help India in get over its rare earth issues?
I'll just explain that. The question is, how can Japan and India jointly get over the monopoly of China in rare earths? Because they are controlling 95% of the earth, and that is where the future technology is going to be dependent on. So that is how Japan and India together can get over this.
Can you respond, Dr. Nagao? And thereafter, I will request Brigadier Sandeep to sum up the thing, and we will close this session. Dr. Nagao.
Could you please repeat the question itself? A little speak fast, and I lost the catch. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Where?
I will explain it. How can Japan and India jointly get over the monopoly of China?
Okay.
Monopoly of China, rare earths. Because Japan has technology to make micro and nano chips and all those things, but rare earths is being totally dominated by China. So all your manufacturing is taking place in China.
Of course, this is long-term process. In long-term process, short-term, there is no solution. But one by one, we need to solve this. Firstly, Japan tried to do is identify the supply line. Because when we check the factory, one product made by the many parts. And these many parts itself was made by many materials. So indeed, even if the company who sells these products, they cannot identify where is the source completely, because their children company or grandchildren company or grandchildren's grandchildren company, but this company, so they have the information of their product, but big companies do not identify the real source of these materials. So this is a result of the global economy, especially after the Cold War. So we developed this system, this network, so complicatedly. So now we need to identify what is the problem exactly is the first step, and we try to do that. And after we identified, we try to line up which one is serious, and which the serious one is we start to call the critical technology, and after that we try from the priority. We try to change the source of the material from China to other country. And in this case, in case of the rare earths, yes, some rare earths completely rely on China. So we need to develop the mine first. That is the first step. But mine demand nearly 10 years to develop. So that's why we need to wait 10 years in this case. That is the current problem. So one by one we need to do. Because the last 30 years, we are under the global economy. Now we are entering a new type of economy, which is a new type but old type. One kind of the block economy, but inside of the block we are free. So that's why we need to do it to deal with China.
Thank you. Admiral Sinha, sir, any last word you would like to say and sum up in 2 minutes, sir? Thereafter we will...
Just a minute, please. Colonel Vijay had raised his hands. Let him, he wanted to say something. Colonel Vijay, sir.
Colonel Vijay. Colonel Vijay, are you there, sir?
Unmute yourself. He's very much there.
Colonel Vijay, are you there, sir? No, he's not.
Colonel Vijay, sir, you are here. Please unmute yourself. You raised the hand.
Admiral Sinha, sir, will you like to sum up in 2 minutes, sir? Thereafter, I will request President IIRF to give his final closing.
Well, thank you very much. I think it has been a very frank discussion, and very frankly, Dr. Nagao has spoken everything that is required to be spoken. I would say my own. I look at India-Japan cooperation to be increasing in every sector, though it may happen very slowly because the Japanese sort of constitution does not permit very open, offensive nature of friendship. So that is one issue, and therefore they will have to work within the constitutional provision. But having said that, the economic cooperation, let us not forget that Japan is the 5th largest investor in India in FDI terms. And the two leaders have signed an agreement that in the next 5 years, they will take it up to $30 billion of trade with each other. And that may happen because you see the train, that bullet train which is coming, there are a lot of small SMEs organizations which are coming up. And the biggest product of Japan, which is visible, is the Honda in every city and is growing by the day. So I think that science and technology partnership is very important, and that is where India and Japan are now wanting to work very close. There are areas where pure science development in Japan is much ahead of that of India. So DRDO and the CSIR both are in contact with their organizations in Japan, and that goalpost has to be set, and that goalpost must be higher. I must tell you that there is a sound operated underwater surveillance system which hopefully Japan and India will develop together, or maybe it will be put in places so that every movement of submarine in and out of Indian Ocean will be known to both the parties. Thank you.
for taking time from USA. It is late night there. And thank you, Dr. Nagao, for wonderful inputs and insights that you gave about from the Japanese perspective. And now I will request Brigadier Sandeep, President IIRF, to give his closing address and thank the participants.
I would like to first thank Admiral Sinha sir and Dr. Satoru Nagao, who had been kind enough to accept our invitation and come and educate us, as well as people seeing it, as well as people subsequently seeing it in our channel. It has been a great exchange of issues related to Indo-Japanese relations, and it has to go. The two democracies are there, and these two democracies who had long-standing cultural relations and believe in the same Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, that is, the entire world is one, and we have to live in a very cordial atmosphere without creating problems of all kinds, economic or military or technological problems for each other. So that is where we should move forward to ensure that the world is a place for good living, and we have to ensure that people are happy, and the short time we spend here are spent happily. And that is where Japan and India can join together and become the Vishwagurus and to ensure that this Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam is spread all over.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks all those who have attended and those who would be attending subsequently. And it has been a great start for the day. And I thank you everybody, and especially our expert panel, Admiral Shekhar Sinha sir and Dr. Satoru Nagao. Very kind of you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. See you, Raj. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Dr.